And we're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 4 of MarksWood 35. How are you doing today, Joseph?
I'm doing swell. How are you?
I'm doing quite well myself. So we've got some good topics we're going to go over today. We're going over the brand new Canon Rebel T6.
Oh,
which
hot
looks
stuff.
I know it looks
Hot
really,
off the press.
it looks really good.
That's why we're doing this show today, really.
Yeah, I mean it is. We had to do this show because I'm thinking about leaving Nikon just to get that camera.
Well, yes.
So we're going over that. We're going to be going over megapixels and how many do we really need in this camera brand megapixel war that we're in. And then we're also going to be talking about Panasonic, a couple of their cameras. And then a good one, which is the what gear that we would recommend you have when you're just kind of starting out. You know, how much do you really need when you're kind of just getting started and want to make some good pictures? So what topic do you want to handle first? I'll let you choose and hand it over to you.
Let's do the megapixel battle.
All right, cool. So as it sits right now, I shoot with the Nikon D810, which has 36 megapixels. You shoot with the what, A6000?
A6000, which has 24 megapixels.
24. Okay. So have you ever been in a situation yet where you wish you had more megapixels? Are you happy with 24? What are your thoughts on the whole megapixel thing?
Very happy with 24. I think when I started doing a little bit more landscape stuff, some of the more megapixels can make more detail.
Mm-hmm.
But it can also add more noise if I'm doing some portraits or if I'm doing events and there's a little bit dark setting. It usually creates a little bit more noise, I found, if you have more megapixels.
Mm-hmm.
Unless of course you're dealing with like a full frame or something like that. But if you're dealing with a crop sensor, sometimes having a bigger pixel can help that. So but Sony's been good with their noise reduction. I think 24, I like around 20, 24. I think that's a pretty good.
So yeah, in the year 2016, there's still a lot of people shooting at like 12 megapixel cameras, and there's of course this whole group of photographers out there that believes that that you're fine with like 5 megapixels, and then there's that group that thinks they need 100 megapixels. So yeah, I think that I got the Nikon D810 not just because of the 36 megapixels. It had a lot of other features that were nice. Of course, the 36 megapixels was a big deciding factor because I do shoot mainly landscape stuff, and I do a lot of printing. What?
And you print your stuff too.
Right, exactly. That's where the megapixels really come into play is the printing. Because when you're on when you're on any kind of web page or sharing it on Facebook, they compress it anyway. So if you put Facebook is not going to show a true 36 megapixel resolution photo. They're just going to show this compressed, blurry version of it. So yeah, for web stuff, you're fine with like a 5, 8 megapixel camera if you just want to do purely social media stuff. But when you start printing, that's where you want the megapixels to really come in, because as the photo gets stretched and the dimensions keep getting bigger and bigger on the print, it keeps the detail together and holds the pixels together if there are more pixels in the resolution. So
if you're shooting, because if you're on Instagram, their square photos are 2048 by 2048.
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially a 4 megapixel picture. So I mean, really, you're fine if you have anywhere. I think around 8 to 10 is what you need.
Mm-hmm.
Probably if you really want to do some good photography starting out. I almost bought the I think it was the Panasonic LX100. Do you remember when I was debating that?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
it was a crazy cool camera, micro 4/3 sensor. It was like the weird thing about it was I think it was like a 14 megapixel or 16 megapixel sensor, but it produced 12 megapixel images because it would change the aspect ratio natively instead of cropping the picture.
Oh, weird.
So when you would do 1:1 or 4:3 or 16:9, it would still use more of the sensor, and depending on it. And I was really debating if 12 was fine. I think 12 megapixels would have been fine for the stuff that I was doing.
Yeah, and there's another like theory behind this whole megapixel thing too that people should understand, is that if you're shooting a I don't know, let's say 24 megapixel on a cropped sensor camera, and you're shooting like say a 16 megapixel on a full frame, that's going to be about the same because the full frame just gives better image quality. So you can still make great prints if you're using a 16 megapixel full frame camera. just because you're getting a larger sensor size, therefore more pixels per inch, bigger, higher pixel density when you go to print. Ever since I started printing my own stuff, there's so much math that goes into this whole printing thing and figuring out like in Photoshop how to export it. It just makes me like, I would never want to work in a print lab. It's terrible. I'm almost at the point where I'm just letting SmugMug handle all my stuff for printing because there's so much that goes into it. But I have this cool little chart here that I pulled up that I used when I first got the printer, and it's basically for your pictures need to be exported for like excellent quality prints at 300 ppi, which is pixels per inch. That's like the standard export rate for a really excellent quality print. And a 12 megapixel camera, which is 4290 by 2800, exported at 300 ppi will give you a really excellent quality 15 by 10 print. So this is a whole chart. So like 16 megapixels will give you 17 by 11, and then 36 megapixels will go all the way up to 48 by 32 print. So you can find megapixel. If you just type in megapixel chart online, you can see exactly how big your camera can print. Because that's a big question people ask. Well, what if I want to make a print the size of a billboard? It's all in, what your sensor can do, and if you want to up-res it in Photoshop and all that stuff. There's a lot of stuff that goes into printing that's just crazy.
Yeah, see, I don't print anything. I've printed once to like my LaserJet printer about 8 years ago.
Oh, nice.
When I had paper and the printer and ink all at the same time. But other than that, I just don't print them. And now there are even services now, like you mentioned SmugMug, and there's other things like Fracture and other places where you can, or even through Apple and iPhoto or Photos now, you can just order prints. I mean, they're a little overpriced, but whatever. It's convenience. So
Flickr has even got a pretty decent print service. You can go over like right from your Flickr work, and they'll let you like put together a print book and everything. I did that a couple of years ago. It was pretty cool. They were doing like when that new CEO took over, they did this whole photo sale thing, and I think I made a whole book of my prints on actual like photo gloss paper in the book. It was like $25 or something. So they actually do some pretty cool print services through Flickr too.
Yeah, that was when Marissa Mayer took over as the CEO.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course there's Shutterfly, where you can always go to any website and they'll always have like 1,000 coupons for like 6,000 free prints from Shutterfly. If you've ever seen, they're everywhere. There's always like a Groupon for like $10 to get 70,000 prints free from Shutterfly. Everywhere there is, I forgot what was it. Jen and I, we bought something or whatever, and like I think it was something for the baby, and like within the package that we bought, there was like a coupon for like 1,000 prints at Shutterfly. So it had nothing to do with photos, what we bought, but there was just a Shutterfly thing in there. They're like, oh, by the way, you can get 1,000 photos from Shutterfly. So
yeah, they do a lot of those sales.
It was ridiculous. And so do you think that, because I know people starting out will wonder, more megapixels is a better picture. Is that true?
I would say it depends on the category you're entering into photography. If you want to do mainly portraits and like event work, if your focus is like low light weddings and all that kind of stuff, I would stick around the like 20 or under megapixels, because even with cropped or full frame, because the 12 megapixel, 16 megapixel range is kind of like that sweet spot where you can crank that ISO up to like 6,400, like 8,000, and you're still not going to see much noise because there's not so many pixels to just take over the shadow areas. So yeah, I would say if you're going into event photography, don't worry about it too much. Just under 20 would be good, just so that you can control your noise better. Which you'll notice that Nikon's flagship cameras for that kind of stuff that are like $6,500, they've always had 12, 16, or 20 megapixels. They've never been these crazy megapixel monsters. And they're almost $7,000 cameras. So if you're going into like landscape architecture where you need like these detail and big marketing prints, I'd say go as high as you can go. Just the sky's the limit.
Because even with those, you don't have to worry about noise really, because you're sitting on a tripod. You can keep the shutter open longer to reduce noise. You don't have to worry about that. And that's also sort of how you mentioned that Fuji keeps most of their cameras like right at 16 megapixels. They feel that's the sweet spot.
They do, yeah, and they're really good at, and they're all crop sensors. Fuji doesn't have a digital full frame, and they do really well controlling the noise on their crop sensor cameras. I've seen a couple of people that I know that I used to go to church with bought the XT1 when it came out, And I've seen shots from that all over, social media. I mean, not that you can see the full resolution on social media, but they've shown me some of their shots, and man, like 6400, even a few of them have like 8000 or 12800. They're really, really clean. I mean, I'm sure they've done some Lightroom work, but the fact that you can do that on a crop sensor camera, I'm sure they know that their 16 megapixels is allowing them to achieve that sweet spot for controlling noise.
So more megapixels does not always equal better picture.
Correct.
And there, I remember even I had the HTC One M8 as like my backup phone. And that was the phone where they went from like an 8 megapixel down to a 4 megapixel camera, and sort of shocked everyone. And their reasoning was, well, we'll have better low light pictures, and each micron, I think it was like 2 microns per pixel or something like that. And it produced they realized that most people that were taking photos with their phone were sharing them on Facebook or Instagram. And so by having the lower megapixel and larger micron per pixel or whatever, they actually had better low light photos. It was still grainy, and I still think 4 megapixels was a little bit too small, but the reasoning behind it I thought was pretty good, and actually at times would create some pretty cool images as well.
Right. That's a big thing that people are now finally starting to get, since they're seeing these phones, and since Apple phones have stayed the same megapixels for so long, and they've always been the best low light phone ever because of that. They didn't want to jump to 12 or 24 or whatever megapixels before they could control the low light, because they've always been really good at managing low light with image quality. And it's the same thing with DSLRs or mirrorless cameras. More megapixels doesn't mean just a better looking photo. You're not the reality is, I even have a 5K screen, a 5K iMac, and 5K is 8 megapixels is what it equates to. So I can't even see the real 36 megapixel full resolution file unless I take my 5K iMac and I zoom at like a 5:1 ratio in Photoshop. So even I can't see the true beauty of my photo. It's all for when you're ready to print or you're ready to start blowing it up and making some crazy fine art stuff. Most people's laptops aren't going to be able to show you the true resolution of your camera. So you're not even going to be able to tell if you sit here on my computer and give me a 12 megapixel photo and a 50 megapixel photo. I'd never tell the difference until I start zooming in and checking the detail.
So now at one point, and this is sort of another advantage of having more megapixels at times, is that you can crop the picture down and you can still have a reasonably good photo, which is what one of the Lumias Microsoft had, or Nokia Microsoft Windows Phone had. It was a 47 megapixel camera, and they were advertising it as digital zoom, because basically you can take the 47 megapixel and just crop it down to this tiny little picture, and you have like an 8 megapixel photo.
Right.
And there were other issues with the camera, but it was a really incredible idea. And so that's another pro of having like a 24, 36, 48, whatever megapixels. You can crop it down and still have a good looking picture, which is nice.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, there's been a couple times where I've thought, like, when I get back to the office and I start checking stuff, I'm like, man, this would look really good as a panorama, and I'll want to just like chop off the top and the bottom and squeeze it down. And now that I shoot with the D810, I do that, and it still gives me like a 20 megapixel photo, which is great. But the cool thing about when I was shooting with like 12 and 16 megapixel cameras, I had a D700, which is 12 megapixels. And the way that I used to kind of overcome the megapixel challenge when I wanted to do some prints is there's this company called Really Right Stuff that makes tripods and ball heads. And so they make this panorama head that kind of like locks your camera on this axis, and it just swings it around and keeps the horizon level the whole time. And so what I would do is I would just take a series of 12 megapixel photos all around the scene. I would stitch them together, and it would give me, like a 100 megapixel photo to crop and work with. So you don't necessarily have to just say, oh, well, I have 12 megapixels, I'm never going to get high detail. You can take panoramas if you're willing to put in the extra work on location and in post-production, and then you can give yourself a pretty high-res shot. Just as an example, I did a panorama with my Nikon D810 for the first time ever a few months back, and it was a 400 megapixel photo because it was like 12 shots. I did it was insane. So my computer fans were buzzing. It was just insane. I was like, man, why is my computer having so much trouble with this? And so I went into Photoshop and checked the resolution, and it was like 400 megapixels or something. It was ridiculous.
So did you put it on there and do a rapid fire, or did you just
No, I did. Yeah, I have one of those pano heads, and so I locked it into the head, and I just cranked the wide angle lens out to 16 millimeters. And typically, what you want to do when you're doing it manually is you always want to take the scene, and then you want to just take the far left frame and put it over the half mark of where you started. So you just keep cutting off half of your picture. And so I think I took like 12 or 14 shots because it's a wide angle lens. So I had to like move it, little bits, pieces. And then I had a cable release. So I was just lining up the focus, and I would take the shot, and then I would go and take another shot. That way I never touched the camera, so it didn't move the horizon line at all. Because when you're trying to stitch these things, you can get some weird effects if you're not level all the way through.
Oh yeah, I had a camera. I can't remember if it was the HX100V or it might even been like some point and shoot that I think Jen and I had a long time ago. One of the Coolpix cameras, where they had a pano mode where it would take a picture and it would ghost half of the screen with half of the photo that you just took. And so you try and line that up with the scene and then take that picture, and it would ghost the other half, and you would just do that until you had what you wanted.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was pretty. I can't remember what it was on. I think it was on one of the little Coolpix point and shoots she had that. Yeah. We hated the camera, but it's just because it was such a small sensor. I didn't know much about photography at the time. It would always take blurry photos. It's because whenever you're on auto, it always resorts to leaving the shutter open longer rather than boosting the ISO, and so it would always create these little blurry photos. We hated it.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, well, what's funny is it's only in like the past year or two that camera manufacturers have finally figured out that if you leave your camera in ISO auto, they'll actually let you choose the threshold. So like they'll let you choose, well, if it's an auto, I only want it to go up to 3,200 or something. Whereas before, it might say, oh, I'm going to go up to 52,000 and just crank it, and then you get horrible photos. So finally, the last couple of years, they've let you do that. I noticed that on my Nikon D810, it has the built-in intervalometer for time-lapse shooting, and I'm just sitting here. When I got it, I was like, how is it going to do a time-lapse if I start at like sunset and then the stars come out? How am I going to get the correct exposure when the sun goes down? And so ISO auto is how you do that. It just cranks up the ISO based on the exposure, and so it's actually really helpful for that kind of stuff.
I like that. I was reading about someone who was using, it was some camera review for like a Leica or something like that, and he was saying how there was some mode, I don't know what it was. My camera may do it as far as I know, but it would go, he would say, I don't want my shutter speed any slower than this. I don't want my ISO any higher than this. And I don't want, or whatever. And then you would put it in auto that was within those parameters, and it would move around those parameters while not crossing those thresholds based on what he had said. And I was like, oh, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, I've known a lot of people do. There's the mode dial now on a couple cameras have like user settings, and I think it's in there. You can have like a custom user setting mode, and you can choose what you want to happen in there, so you can quickly change to a setting for a specific type of photography. If you're doing like sports 1 second, and then you want to switch over to a portrait or something like that.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, it's a nice feature. Yeah, so basically, at the end of the megapixel thing, more megapixels doesn't mean better photos. It's all in just what you're trying to achieve. If you want to achieve big prints, you want big megapixels. Most everyone else would be, 20 megapixels, 24 is like more than enough, more than you'll ever need. So,
yeah. Yep.
All right. What topic you want to cover next?
Let's go to the starting photography gear.
All right, this is a good one. I was excited about this one because me and you both have been through and talked about so much gear that we talk about it all the time. So
yes,
what do you think? If someone comes to you and says, Joseph, I love photography, I want to get into it. What would you recommend that I start out with in order to start calling myself a photographer and start getting better photos and all that stuff?
A lens.
That's a good one.
Need a lens.
Yep.
No. Well, I don't have a lot of gear. So the first thing I always get is a bag, because you want to have some sort of bag that can actually, and my bag right now, and here's the problem I have right now with my bag is my dad had a bunch of bags from his Nikons, and so I just went and grabbed one of his Nikon bags. My lenses are so small that like I can fit 2 or 3 lenses in one of the slots for like one DSLR lens. And so I don't have, it's not made for my camera. So my lenses like move around whenever it's in the bag. And I don't have a real good slot for my camera because my camera's as big as one of their lenses for the old Nikons. And so getting a bag that just fits your camera and your gear is, I think, a really big one, because I'll be like, you know, going around in events, and I'll be like pulling out different lenses, and I switch lenses all the time, and I'm switching to the wide angle and switching to the zoom and to the 50, and it's so hard when they're all just like kind of scrambled within my bag, and so I have to like feel it out and be like, I think, oh, that's a 50, and then I'll pull that out and do it. So having a bag that is small but fits what you want and maybe has a little bit of room to grow, I think would be a good one.
I agree. You know, have you tried a fanny pack?
I have not. I've want to try a fanny pack because I think they're making it come back this year.
Yeah, you should try like the purple and yellow fanny pack from the 70s. That'd be good. Yeah, so you know, I totally agree. I am what I would call myself a camera bagaholic. I have, as you can probably
behind you right now, and I see at least 1, 2, 3, I think, with just within that view.
Yeah, and then over here there's 3 more. So yeah, I have, but I mean, it all starts with what you said. I started out with something that could just handle what I had. I didn't want, you know, to carry this huge bag and have like one lens inside of it. So yeah, I've just upgraded over the years. And you'll also, it's good to try out new camera bags and switch around, because you'll find that one camera bag really never does, you know, everything you want it to do. Sometimes I'll take a messenger bag if I'm just like walking the streets and doing some street photo stuff, because I don't want this, you know, big backpack while I'm trying to like stay under the radar and shoot people. You know, it's like, what better way to say, hi, I'm a photographer, than have this big backpack with a tripod and all that stuff. So, you know, messenger bag is always good, a little backpack. And so the situation I'm in now, is I have this like one big camera backpack that just holds all my stuff all the time. I never really take it anywhere. It just holds everything. And then whenever, based on the job that I'm doing, if it's going to be like a landscape shoot or an event or something, I'll just kind of divvy the equipment out to the correct bag for that situation. So yeah, it's good to have multiple bags to, you know, to fit different situations, because when you need to get your gear, you want it to be quick and comfortable. You don't want to have some bag that's gonna, you know, kill your neck or shoulder. So always get good padding, and a good bag will go a long way. You definitely need that when you're first starting.
So what else do you think? I think for me, the only other thing, because I don't have a lot of gear, would be a good tripod. And I still don't have one yet.
Yes.
I need one desperately. Doing handheld bracketing is proving to be a little difficult, even though Sony's
got you a pro. That's a pretty good skill to have.
You know, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a good tripod. I haven't got one yet. I'm going to be getting one soon from work, but I don't have one yet. And so, but those things can range from, you know, $30 to, you know, I don't know, you know how much they go.
Yeah, like $3,000 or $4,000.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, so the biggest thing is, yeah, when you need a tripod, but don't buy some $50 one online on sale at Walmart or something. Make sure that the whole point of a tripod is to have a sturdy set of legs to keep your camera on. You don't want to accidentally knock into the tripod and then all of your equipment just tips over. So get a good pair of sturdy legs. I'm sure we'll recommend some tripod brands in the notes after the show. I'll put some links in there for a couple really good ones. But yeah, tripod's good to have. And then as far as like little things, I usually just set them here on my desk. I would always recommend one of these guys. It's a little air blower. Whenever you have dust or any kind of crap, the first like instinct for people is to go up to their lens and breathe on it, and then just give it a good wipe off with your shirt.
Yeah.
But there's actually a lot of acid that's in our breath, and when it fogs up in the lens, it actually over time ruins the multi-coating that they have in the lenses. So if you end up breathing on your lens and wipe it off, it actually will ruin the coating that's on your lens, which stops things like lens flare and protects your glass. So the little air blower is like $5 online, and you just puff it right into your lens and all the dust falls off. So these things are so cheap and they're invaluable to have, so that you don't have to, breathe on your lens and use your shirt or whatever. So that's a really good thing. Other than that, really, I don't want to recommend a bunch of stuff because you don't need a whole lot these days. When you're starting out, if you have a camera, a tripod, a bag, and just, that little thing for some cleaning, I think. Other than that, I'd say a really good piece of software to manage all of your photos on your computer, just a good way to organize them, because you don't want to get this camera and start building up this, big pile of photos, and then by the time you have so many, you don't know what to do with them and how to organize them. So definitely find a good piece of software that works for you so you can organize them.
I agree. And then the more specific things depends on what type of photography that you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you go out and do more things, and remember I talked to you, sometimes I'll go out and I'll be like, how do I get that sunset to actually look like the sunset whenever I see it through my car or through my sunglasses? It's like, oh, well, you need a polarizer. I'm like, well, what's a polarizer? And then so there's all these different filters and things, ND filters that you can get. I mean, you can go bonkers buying all these ridiculous things that I can't afford. Well, filters are cheap. So,
yeah.
But I think starting out, I agree. Tripod, bag.
Mm-hmm. Also, I can think of a backup drive. A good backup drive is key when you're wanting these, because it's pointless to have a camera and have all the software if you're not going to back them up. So if your computer hard drive crashes or whatever, you got to have them backed up. So get a good backup drive. You can get those super cheap these days. You can get storage has gotten so affordable. So get a good backup drive. And then, like you said, depending on the genre of photography you're going into, if you say, hey, I want to go into wedding photography, well, you might want to look at some lighting. You might want to get some cheap flashes, because you're definitely going to want some kind of lighting if you're trying to shoot a reception or something like that.
What do you think would be, we're not going to go down this rabbit hole that far, but if you have an interchangeable lens camera and you get the kit lens that comes with it, which usually is 16 to 50 or 18 to 55, what would be a good second lens?
I always recommend probably a good prime lens, a 50 millimeter prime or a 35. If you're shooting a crop sensor camera, get a 35 millimeter 1.8. And if you're shooting full frame, get a 50 millimeter 1.8. Those are typically the most affordable prime lenses.
Yes.
And I mean, we're talking like a couple $100. Some of them 150. So they're really affordable, and it's like the quickest way to get better image quality out of your camera, because you can shoot at that shallow depth of field and get that nice sharp subject with the nice out of focus background. So
definitely, I agree. That was my favorite lens ever. Was my on my Sony A37. I got the what was the brand that they bought? That old, it was a 51.7.
Yeah, that's right. That is a Minolta. Yeah,
Minolta Maxim lens. Yeah, 1.7, like $40.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That thing on KEH.com, and that thing was amazing. Insane chromatic aberrations, but it's great. I love that lens so much.
Yeah. And now that was a manual focus lens, but your camera had a focus motor, right?
It did. A37 would autofocus with it, and it had focus peaking, so it was great. It was a good combination. But yes, and now after shooting a lot with the 50, I still love it, but I definitely want a 35 with a crop sensor, which is actually really like a 50-55. So the 50 on a crop sensor is like, I have to get really far away from.
It's like an 80 something. Yeah. So it's almost nearing the telephoto end. So
it is. And I didn't think about that. And so now that I'm debating.
So now you just have to get a full frame. Just get the Sony A7R.
I just got to get the A7R. That's really the easiest answer.
That's right.
Think about it.
Yeah. So I would say the kit lens is always good, because it's going to be your most versatile lens if you're just going, walking around the streets or family vacation or something. They're typically like an 18 to 55, 99% of the time. Sometimes you'll get lucky and it'll be like an 18 to 135, which is a really good range.
Yeah.
But yeah, the 50 or the 35 is always a really good second choice, because it's affordable and typically really, really good image quality for a great price.
And I like one of the things, we'll talk about Trey Ratcliffe a lot, I'm sure. One of the things I love about him is that he will shoot with the kit lens a lot.
Yeah, he does.
And I was looking at one of his photos the other day, I'm trying to pull it up, where he shot with an NEX5R in the kit lens. Yeah. And I was like, dude, I had the NEX5R, and that was like a great, great camera. But yeah, so don't worry about, I mean, if you can get more lenses, you can, but do it. But the kit lens is not that bad.
Yeah. Well, what's funny to me is when just briefly going on lenses for a second, sometimes I feel like I'm one of the only, or I would guess both of us are some of the only photographers in the world that understand that you don't always have to have a 1.8 or 2.8 lens. If you're doing landscape photography like me, I have a couple of lenses that are 2.8 because they're good sometimes for, some portrait stuff. I've done some portraits and events, but like, speaking of Trey Ratcliffe, he said that in an interview, he said that his go-to lens that he uses 99% of the time is a Sony 24 to 240, 3.5 to 5.6. So from an aperture, point of view, that's not a very good lens, but it's a great range. And he's a landscape photographer, so he mainly shoots at like f8, f11, f16. He doesn't have to have 1.8, 2.8 apertures.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So, you don't think that, you have to, because the weirdest thing to me is when they have these wide angle lenses, like 16 to 35 and 12 to 24, these like crazy lenses, and they're like 2.8. Like, why do you want, a 12 millimeter lens at 2.8? The only thing I can think of is astrophotography, so that you can open the aperture really wide to capture the stars.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But even then, if you're at f4, just bump the ISO up an extra stop. And then, so I don't know. Yeah, so anyway, camera, good camera bag, tripod, backup drive, software, and the what else do we say?
The air.
Flash. Flash if you're doing event photography. It all depends on the category of photography you're going into. But yeah, just those basic things. Just that's all you really need. I mean, if we strip it down to its rawest form, you really could just start with an iPhone. So, we don't, the gear isn't the most important stuff, but me and you just love talking about it. And we're definite techie gearheads. We love talking about all the new stuff. So
I don't have any of it, but I like talking about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it a lot.
I am what we call a portographer, where this isn't my main job. I don't make money off my photography, so I don't buy all the gear, but I talk about it and look at it a lot. And
that's right.
And drool.
Okay. So here's what we have to do then.
Yeah.
You just need to so when you're out with your wife next time, you need to take a picture while she's watching, and then just post it online, and I'll buy it. I'll buy your print, and you're like, see, honey, I can make, and then there you go. She'll be like, Joseph, great, go buy all the gear, and then you can buy it all. So there you go.
Right. I can do it.
That's the easiest way to convince the wife. So yeah, I mean, that's what I do. I just have my, distant cousins. I've never sold print to anyone, but, cousins and stuff. So they just buy all my work, and it's, I keep getting gear. So
there you go.
Why not?
I can do it.
That's right. All right. What next? We got Panasonic GX8
cameras.
Canon T6. Let's talk about that.
Let's get that one out of the way.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's taking the world by storm. Some say it's going to be the next big wave of cameras, is the T6.
Yep.
We are being extremely sarcastic. So the T6, I don't really know what the place of this camera is. It's because they've got a T6i and a T6s, and now they have the T6. I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Well,
I don't know why it exists.
First off, the whole Canon Rebel line just doesn't make sense to me, because none of them are really that good. They're not bad cameras, but for some reason they're like the most popular beginner camera in the entire world. It seems like everybody has a Canon T3i, and I just don't know. I don't know what the whole popularity thing is. But yeah, with this camera, so let's go ahead and get some specs out of the way. So this thing's an 18 megapixel crop sensor camera. It's got 9 autofocus points. Wow.
Whoa. 9?
9 whole points. Yeah. So I'm pretty impressed with that. Oh, listen to this. One of the autofocus points is cross type. Just one.
Whoa.
Wow. Great.
Around there.
Yeah. And then you can get it with an 18 to 55 kit lens. So,
So $550 is what it's starting at. The A6000 you can get for about that same cost, and it has like 179 focus points.
Yeah.
Much better low light.
Yep.
Much better image quality, because I compared them on somewhere. Well, we don't even have the T6 available for comparison on most websites. But let's do the T6i, which is supposed to be better than the T6. And Sony beats it when it comes to image quality, dynamic range.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So pretty much every major statistical category outside of more lenses.
I'd say battery life, probably.
It doesn't say, but probably.
Yeah.
So the A6000 is smaller, better viewfinder coverage, better image quality, more focus points, large viewfinder, dynamic range, better low noise, thinner, shoots faster, is lighter, and better color depth. Other than that, for the same cost, is really good.
Wow.
So
yeah. So basically, we're not endorsing the Canon Rebel T6 in any way, shape, or form.
No.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. Like I'm with you. It's very confusing. I don't know why.
I get it if they're pricing it at like $399.
Yeah.
You know, for $399 with a kit lens, that's a great camera because you still have a lot of lenses available for it. But I just don't. I mean, they're still selling their T3i for $600 on Amazon, and this is basically the same thing as that, but with Wi-Fi and NFC for like $50 cheaper.
Right. It's just wild. Yeah. Well, here's the weirdest thing to me. So I don't know. A couple hours ago, I watched B&H Photo. They have like a first look of the Canon Rebel T6 on their YouTube channel.
Oh baby!
And I watched their video, and it's just this guy standing here saying, "This camera has seen intelligent auto mode, so you can walk out with confidence and feel that it'll adapt to any situation." And I'm like,
poor guy that has to go out and pipe up this little machine. Oh my goodness!
I know. So you're just like, wait, I'm having to pay $550 for an auto mode that
it has autofocus
that every camera has, and it doesn't even work that great. So
it's for you. It's one thing. I mean, I guess I guess it's their really entry level DSLR. So like their T6i would be their better one. I guess their I series has better video and stuff, but it still is not. I mean, even this compared to the T6i is not. It's nothing. I mean, it's. I just don't get it.
It's hard to say who's going to buy this camera. I mean, I don't know. They also, like, in that 3-minute like sales pitch video, they were like, oh, and it, you can share photos right to Facebook, just like your smartphone. And they show this like, lady with a smile taking pictures of her baby doing this, and then taking her smartphone and smacking the side with NFC, and like, it's on Facebook now. It's like, yeah, but why would you do that when you just could use your phone?
Yeah, it's every time I've used any type of send it to my phone software, it's always sucked.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are not sending that full resolution photo. They're sending like a cropped or not a cropped, but a smaller compressed version of it, like a 5 or an 8 megapixel.
Exactly. Which at that point, why not use your iPhone?
I mean, if you have an iPhone, just get the Lightning to SD card adapter. Take your card out, put it in there. Full resolution photo goes directly on your iPhone.
Yep, that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know this. Like I can't think of any like really positives to say why someone should buy this camera. The focus point is just like absolutely embarrassing. 9 focus points. Megapixels aren't bad. I mean, 18 megapixels. That's pretty standard these days. Kit lenses from Canon are never really good. Nikon kit lenses are way better.
Oh, here we go. I got it now. There's a new food mode on the dial for the, quote, foodie or blogger to easily capture stunning images of the food they love. Canon says this mode enhances the color and brightness of the food images while at the same time making the images ready to share.
What?
There's literally a food mode on the dial.
I don't know what to say. I'm almost just, should we end the show right here? I don't know.
Are there other images that they make not ready to share?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what kind of marketing guy is going to say this. If you put it on this mode with the piece of fried chicken, like your photos are ready to hit the web.
And so, like, for the hipsters like me, I mean, I'm wearing driver cap and beard. If you're gonna take pictures of food, you don't pull out your DSLR that's massive. I mean, people do it as a joke, but nobody really does that unless you're like maybe a food critic or something like that.
Right.
Nobody is really being like, oh, wow, I love this picture, or I love this food. Did you bring your T6 with you? Yeah, hold on. Wait, hold on. Turn it to food dial real quick. There we go. I mean, all that probably does is like boost the saturation.
Yeah.
something like that, and maybe it boost the contrast or something. I mean, oh my gosh, I mean, it's just, I mean, I don't know how to say about this.
Yeah, the hipster that's going to actually do this is going to pull out like a Fuji X Pro 1 or like a Leica Q and snap it that way. It's not going to be a Canon T6.
No. So for anyone that's getting into photography and you want to get an entry-level DSLR, just get an A6000 or something like that. It's the same cost and you get way more.
Yep. I would.
If you're going to get a Canon, get like a T2i, which is significantly cheaper with virtually all the same features. You will miss out on the food mode, but I think you can still do okay. So
yeah, I think somehow you'll get over it without the food mode.
You'll survive.
Yeah. I would say if I could recommend one entry-level DSLR and one entry-level mirrorless, I would say go with Sony A6000 for mirrorless.
Yes.
And I would say DSLR, if you want to spend just a little bit more money than the A6000, I'd say go with like a Nikon D70-100 or D70-200. Those are really, really good crop sensor bodies.
And I had the D3300 and loved it.
Yeah. So even that, and that's what do those go for now? Those are pretty affordable.
Same cost. It's the D30. So their low light is way better than Canon's when it comes to entry level DSLRs.
Yeah, definitely.
That's why I went with the D3300 over any of the Canons, because I'm not a joker. So their battery life on the 3300 was insane. I mean, it was like, I forgot what it was, but I would charge that thing like once every 2 weeks. Yeah. So yeah, I would say any of the Nikon entry levels are really good. Canons aren't bad. It's not that they're horrible cameras. It's just that we feel like they're overpriced and they're not really putting a lot of cool stuff in it. When you go to like the mirrorless cameras and their stuff is like the most exciting, kind of bleeding edge stuff for entry level. So value for money, we definitely like those. But yeah, the Nikons are entry level Nikons seem to be better.
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing is that Canon, before Nikon came out with their D800 series, Canon always had the best megapixels and Nikon always had the best low light. So it was kind of a pick and choose thing. But now that Nikon has figured out how to give you mass megapixels with great low light performance, they're taking over right now. So hopefully Canon is in this like mode of silence right now because they're going to be releasing something epic and awesome. But I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I would even say if you're going to be getting an entry-level camera, if you don't need a DSLR, Canon does have like the GX1 or like the little handheld fixed lens cameras. Those are really good.
Yeah, I actually took one of those to Disney World. I think a year ago. I took the I don't know, maybe the GX1, something like that. There's probably a Mark II by now, but it was actually really good.
Yeah. So definitely, I would do that.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, I mean, Canon. There's, we don't hate Canon. There's just a lot of stuff wrong with their entry level DSLRs right now.
So Amazon says they have, or actually, I was looking at SnapSort and they said that the D3300 was $295.
Wow.
No way, that can't be. No, that's not right. It's $450.
Oh, okay.
I love when SnapSort or any website just pulls whatever generated link they get from Amazon, whether it's like searching and does a search for like whatever. I remember I was looking once and it said like the A7R was like, $200 or something on Amazon. I was like, no, and it was like some accessory or something like that.
Yeah. It's like, well, the strap for the A7R is $200, but A7R itself is a little more.
Yeah, it's the D3300 versus the T6i, which was like their flagship, has much lower noise, significantly better image quality, higher frame rate movies, so 1080-60 versus 1080-30, better color depth, dynamic range, larger viewfinder, longer battery life, 700 shots compared to 440.
Wow.
Smaller, cheaper, lighter, more lenses, and thinner.
Wow.
That's the D3300 versus the T6i.
Yeah. And see, that's Nikon sensors are just beautiful for low light and dynamic range. That's what they've always ruled in. And because they use Sony sensors, naturally, Sony inherits the same great low light and image quality. So, so here's an interesting question. When you are looking for a new camera for yourself, what are like the two, let's say two, what are like the two biggest things that you go straight to, that you look at, like two features that you have to compare against other options?
I look at its low light, because
So
I
you
find
mean like ISO, like the ISO capability, how high it can go?
yeah, and just sort of how it seems to be ranked as far as what people say. But it depends on if I'm looking at a interchangeable lens or if I'm looking at fixed lens, which I feel like I look at way more fixed lens and I always buy interchangeable lens.
Yeah.
But if I'm looking at interchangeable lenses, I think size doesn't really matter to me. I don't mind carrying around a big DSLR rather than a mirrorless, but to me, it's just how much technology they can shove into something for a smaller, for me, usually a cheaper price is what I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd be more willing to go with like an older, really good used camera if it produced really good images rather than a new one that didn't produce as good images but had like 4K video or something like that. So like I was even, like you mentioned, the D was 700 or something like that. It's a full frame for like 450, 500 used. That's a pretty stellar deal because the low light on that is like double what any new great little mirrorless for the same price could do. So that to me is a really big deal. But otherwise, I haven't looked at this before, but weather sealing is something I'm looking at for my next camera because of the situations that we've been in when it literally was a torrential downpour when we're out at these ruins and there's nothing we can do. We have to run back, and
we're like 2 miles from the car.
Oh yeah, we and not 2 miles on like a little dirt road. You have to climb up and go around, and it's muddy and all that stuff. So that would be nice. But for me, I look at value for money because I don't have the money right now to spend on that because it's not my job.
Yeah, the two biggest features I look at typically are weather sealing and dynamic range. Those are the biggest two, which dynamic range, for those who don't know, is just basically how much detail it can capture between the highlights and the shadows. How much detail it can pull back in one photo without having to bracket into HDR photos. And typically Nikons are really good at that. So I would say those are the two. And then obviously I look at the megapixels, but I don't have to have 36. I actually did it was funny, I did a YouTube video on my Finding Middle Earth channel about a week ago, and I named it the D5 versus the D500, which are Nikon's two newest DSLRs. Yeah. And I said they both have 20 megapixels, but where is the successor to the D810? And it's been a week, and it's at 1,000 views. So I think everyone is wondering, where is this, D820 or D900? So, again, I don't care if it stays at 36 megapixels, but I'm just hoping it's right around the corner and that they might just bump it up to 42 or 50. But the two biggest I normally look at are weather sealing and dynamic range.
Yep, definitely, I agree.
Yep. So, all right, Panasonic GX8.
GX8, this thing looks pretty sweet.
Yeah, and this is a micro four thirds camera.
It is. This looks like their kind of competition for the PenF.
Yeah.
It's virtually the same. It looks like it has some, where was I reading this? Some advantages. It does have stabilization. I think it's 4-axis instead of 5-axis stabilization. Let me try and pull up the specs here.
Oh wow, yeah, I'm looking here at the specs for it too. I just noticed it shoots at 10 frames per second. That's pretty wicked for this little camera.
It's pretty crazy. Somebody had it, I think DP Review had it compared to all of its competitors because they just reviewed it with their little crazy. Here we go. GX8. Yeah, the PenF is what it's going against. They both have 20 megapixels. Sensor 4-axis versus 5-axis for the PenF. Autofocus 49-point cross detection or contrast detection autofocus. 81 for the PenF. When you start to get to a certain amount of detection points, I think you're doing all right.
Yeah, it has 4K video on the GX8.
Yes, which I forgot that the PenF didn't have 4K.
Yeah.
It's not a deal breaker for a lot of people. A lot of people that are doing 4K video are probably going to get the GH4.
Yeah.
Probably, which is like just killer for video. This is a big one for me, I think. Tilting screen.
Yeah, that's great.
PenF doesn't have. Not the end of the world, but I've used a fixed lens on my D3300. It was a fixed lens, or I mean a fixed LCD on the back, and I hated that because I love like getting perspective down low, and I want to be able to tilt that screen up to look at me if I'm trying to get a low shot for whatever event or something like that. And I hate having to like get it down low, and then I have to get down low and crouch down. And
yeah,
so
well, here's something kind of cool and unique about the GX8 too, is it's got a tilting EVF.
Really?
Yeah, the EVF actually tilts up and down.
That's pretty
You
nice.
can get the same perspective if you have your camera way down here. You just tilt your EVF up and look at it, like you're looking through those old cameras with the, powder smoke and all that,
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, that's pretty cool that it's got a tilting EVF.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Ultra mic input, yes, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So again, that might be a little bit. So this is definitely more of a video. I guess Panasonic just seems to do pretty well when it comes to video.
They do. Here's a big thing I need to look for is the recording length. What is the?
Oh yeah. I don't know. It is
here we go. 29 minutes 59 seconds.
Man, they're all.
I know the only two that are 4 hours is the GH3 and GH4. They're 4 hours of 4K recording, which is awesome. Yeah, it's got to be something with the firmware why these cameras are not doing this, because
it has something to do with the sensor.
Yeah, I'm longing for the day where I can use my DSLR to record hours of video without having to switch over to a camcorder, because I just bought that Sony camcorder and it's great, but I would have loved to have just bought another DSLR so that I have a backup camera and then just use the video from that.
Yeah. Weather sealing.
Oh, really? On the GX8?
Yeah.
What? Yeah. That's pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, that's a pretty big one right there.
Yeah, that's great.
Battery life is the same as all the others. 330 shots. Jeez, that's not really that great. I mean, it's a tiny camera, so batteries can only get so big. But yeah, it looks pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'm digging it. It looks like also it's at the specs here, and it says that it does. I think I saw somewhere where it does 4K at 30 frames per second, but I think it does 1080 at 60. And did I see 100? Did I see 120 somewhere, or I'm just making this up?
2160 at 30 frames per second, 100 megabits per second.
Okay.
For the 4K.
Yeah. And then so it does 1080 60. And okay, cool. So this one doesn't do. I've seen a lot of them. They'll do 1080 60, and they'll do 720 at 120 frames per second.
Oh yeah. A lot of those little handheld fixed lens cameras are. A lot of them try and do a lot of that slow motion, like the iPhone and Androids have.
Yeah. So all in all, anyway, pretty killer if you're a Panasonic shooter, and they're getting more and more lenses too, which I've noticed, which is nice.
And if you had to choose between the Pen F or the GX8, which one do you think you would get?
That's tough because I think I like the way the Pen F looks better.
Oh yeah.
But I have to, I can't be like that when it comes to features. So I think I would probably go with the GX8 just because it's got 10 frames per second. Panasonic is just known for faster focusing than most of its competitors, so it's probably going to have good autofocus. It's got the tilty screen, the tilty viewfinder, and 4K video. I mean, I think that's a no-brainer. I think I'd go with the Panasonic.
Yeah, I think, believe it or not, I think it's a tilting screen that would maybe. I do like the way the Pen F looks.
Yeah, I love the way it looks.
That is a killer. And I think that they said, some people were saying that they feel the Pen F was kind of targeting more of the kind of photographer, not really video type guy, but more of the traditional photographer that wants something new.
Yeah.
GX8 doesn't really, I mean, it looks great. It looks fine. But a lot of people are saying the Pen F is one of like the nicest cameras that they've seen of recent memory. That's tough. The tilting screen to me might be the killer. Because there's so many situations I've been in where I wanted to get down low, or get up high, and being able to tilt that screen, left and right is going to be, especially when we both have our kids, being able to get the camera down low to take pictures of the kids while they're playing, being able to move that screen up instead of like just guessing that you're getting a good picture, it would be nice.
Yeah.
So I think that might be the killer for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I mean, there's a few things that would make me want to go with the Panasonic, but yeah, the Pen F is just really pretty. It's a really pretty camera.
Good looking camera.
It is. I love it. So, what was the other Panasonic you wanted to talk about?
Well, just real quick, not the
Yeah,
TZ1000.
TZ1000. Okay, so walk me through that. What would make me want to buy that
Not
over
much.
something else?
Well, so I for a while was into the super zoom bridge cameras, or what they call them, bridge cameras.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the HX100V, which is still one of my favorite cameras, the Sony Super Zoom, which is a 30x zoom. And then I had the crappy Canon HS50SX or whatever it is, which everyone loved and I just couldn't stand. And so now Panasonic has quite a few good little super zooms. And they just came out with the TZ1000, which is there's a little text. Let's see.
Yeah, because I want to know what are the specs on so it's a super zoom. So what are the specs on the lens?
So this is a type of super zoom where it's so they have the super zooms where they're now, originally they were like 30x zooms, which is like a lot, and now the super zooms are actually like 60 to 62x, which is ridiculous zoom. When you start to get to that zoom, it's like it looks like you're like shaking, and it's like really hard to actually take a picture. I've used a couple of them. And so these are a type of like super zooms that are now like handheld, like little point and shoots that have like a really long zoom. The only thing with this one is that it doesn't have a really massive zoom like a 30x. It only has like I think a 15x optical, 10x optical zoom.
Okay.
2.8 to 5.9, but it is a 1-inch sensor, which is nice. So you're going to get a little bit better picture quality.
So do you think, is this like Panasonic's answer to try to compete with the Sony RX10?
No, they actually have a competitor to it. That's why I'm not too sure where this one, TZ100, I'm sorry, not 1000.
Oh, 100. Okay.
Yeah. They have other ones. I think that's the thing, is I don't know what this is trying to compete with. It's not competing with the RX100 because it has a 2.8 to 5.9, and that has a 1.8 to 2.8, and only about I think a 5x or 7x zoom on the RX100. And this has 4K video, which is nice. But it's $700, and at that point you might as well just either go ahead and get the RX100 Mark III, which is probably cheaper than that. And so I just don't quite know. But it looks like it could be really good. It has a nice little look to it, but I just don't really know its place in this world. The screen looks very, very low resolution.
Yeah, yeah, for $700, there's got to be some kind of something there that pulls back the price. Because at that point, I was just looking up the A6000 again. If you're going to go 700 there, you can get the A6000 kit with the lens for $650.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and they have a TZ. And now this is, this literally probably can fit into your pocket because it is pretty small. But if you're going to go for that, they have a FZ1000.
Mm-hmm.
Naming conventions aren't difficult enough. And that is it's the same cost, $700. It has 4K, 1-inch sensor, and it is 25 to 400, 2.8 to 4.
Okay.
Great aperture range for 25 to 400 with 4K at 30 frames per second with a 1-inch sensor.
Wow.
So, that's
I'd like to review that one and see how quickly it hits f4 on the zoom range.
I know that's one of the things, because when I was looking at fixed lens cameras, they all had these great little like 1.7 to this or 1.8 to this, and the LX100 was the only one that could go pretty far and still be at or below 2, whereas the RX100 and a few of the others would hit 2.2 with like no time at all.
Yeah.
You zoom just a little bit, you're 2 point, which is not a real big deal when you're dealing with that type of camera. But I would like to know that too, because even 4 at 400 millimeters is pretty great.
Yeah, I mean that's really good. That's at 400 millimeters, and f4 is still going to give you some pretty darn good bokeh, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would think so. So
And what size sensor is that one? Is it, you said it's a 1-inch, right?
1-inch, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is starting to become more of a thing now. Ever since Sony started putting them in there, people were still going below the 1-inch, and nobody really was going up. And then there was only a couple people were doing the 1-inch sensor. Now a lot of people are doing the 1-inch sensor, which is great.
Yeah, well, I just bought the Sony AX100 video camera, and I was looking at so many other video cameras that had similar specs, or even some of them had some better specs than the Sony, but they were working on like 2/3 inch sensors.
Yeah.
And the only video camera I could find in that price range with a 1-inch sensor, which means great low light and better depth of field, was this Sony. So I had to go Sony because it was just, I want a bigger sensor. That's going to give me the best video quality possible.
Yep.
So I'm definitely hooked on the 1-inch sensor thing too, in that category of gear.
I agree.
Well, cool. Are there any last minute stuff other than to just yet again tell people to stay away from the Canon Rebel T6?
We're going to have a launch party for the T6, 24 hours. We'll be going over all the other T line of cameras.
That actually probably will take 24 hours.
It probably would, yeah. T1, T1i, T1s. Yeah, no, I don't think so. I was trying to look and see what other stuff was new, but outside of the Pen F, the GX8, and RX1, R2, there's not really been any other stuff.
Yeah. Well, next time I throw a couple of brackets into Aurora HDR, I'll let you know when I have a 24-hour time, because it'll take about that long. So we'll do the launch party.
The Rings trilogy and watch the Star Wars trilogy, the original, not the prequel.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So then we'll do the launch party then, because we'll have at least 24 to 48 hours until it'll process my HDR. So. And
I hate how Canon does their stupid namings with the EOS 1300D or the T6.
I know. I don't get that.
Because I think in Europe they don't call it like the T6, the T5. They always call it the EOS 1300D or whatever.
Exactly.
Which I'm fine with. Just, stick with one.
Yeah, it's really strange. I don't get it. Yeah, okay. So covered all of our topics. So just to wrap things up, the probably my favorite camera we mentioned on this show, just because I didn't know a lot about it until you kind of turned me onto it, was that Panasonic GX8. That's actually a pretty killer camera. I don't know if we mentioned the price, but it's only $999. So, I mean, that's pretty killer that you get all that for right at $1,000.
Is that body only?
Yeah, body only. Let me see what the kit is. If you go with a...
Yeah, I think it's the same price as the Pen F with the kit, I think.
Yeah, let me see.
Because the Pen F is $1199 body only.
Oh, okay, yeah, so it's a little cheaper. And this has the tilty screen and 4K video.
Dang.
So it's actually already beats the Pen F just on price versus features.
Sexy camera.
Yeah, I'm looking on BH Photo here. I don't see a kit.
I might not have one.
Yeah, it might not. It might just go with body only, and then you can buy whatever. I do see here. It says in the description on B&H, which is pretty cool. It says when you purchase this camera now, you get a free $100 B&H gift card.
Hey, there you go.
So you can put that towards a lens, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Well, cool. So let's go ahead and wrap everything up. Thank you all for watching, and have a great week. We will see you next Wednesday for episode 5. Take care, everybody.
Peace out.